Sure, it's just another vlog about just another book by just another girl living in a post-colonial world where we try not to die trying. Have some coffee, take a seat, and let's read.
The thing about 17 is that every record feels like a gift. When I was growing up, one of my favorite movies was Almost Famous. And they said, if you ever feel lonely, just go to the record store and visit all your friends. This is for my friends. Thank you, 17. Hi everyone, and welcome back to We Know Wonders. Today we are going to be doing a video that I'm very excited for. Right now we are in the throes of comeback season for the 17 fandom, and for those of you who may not be familiar with 17, they are an amazing K-pop boy group and basically the main group that I stan these days. And yeah, they just dropped their 9th mini album called Ataka, and it's so freaking good. The single is called Rock With You, and it has rocked my world. I am here for it. And so yes, today we are going to do this video, which is going to be pretty long because there are 13 members of 17, and I will be recommending books to my fellow carats based on your bias, basically. So yes, I would recommend getting a snack, grabbing a cup of coffee maybe, or tea or soda or whatever it is that you like, and let's have some fun. So I'm going to be going in order of the fan chant, meaning that's not necessarily by age. The 8 will be in the 8th slot. So okay, let's get started. Mr. Choi Sung-chul, aka Leader Nim. I feel like Sung-chul stans are people who have like this very caring instinct, if that makes sense. And I think the reason that they sort of really fall in love with Sung-chul is he seems like the kind of guy who would take care of you, if that makes sense. He seems like the kind of guy that would like arrange everything, make sure everything was in place for you, if that makes sense. And for that reason, I am recommending Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. So this is historical fiction, and if you don't really like historical fiction, I don't think that that's kind of a barrier of entry to this book by any means, just because it's not written in the same way that most historical fiction is written. I would say that this has a very contemporary voice, even if it is talking about like the whole Henry VIII era and all of the Boleyn sisters shenanigans. And the reason I'm recommending this specifically to Sung-chul stans is that this follows Thomas Cromwell, who was basically the guy in charge during that whole period, and he had to take care of everything. Like, he had to make things happen. And I just feel like there's something about this book that makes you fall deeply in love with Thomas Cromwell. And I feel like he has a lot of the same characteristics that Sung-chul does, or that Sung-chul at least projects to the fandom. And yeah, I feel like Sung-chul stans will find another fictional crush in the person of Mr. Thomas Cromwell in this book. Up next, let's talk about my personal bias, Mr. Jeonghan. I am speaking from experience here. I honestly actually don't know any other Jeonghan stans in real life. And I'm not sure if that's just like a normal thing. I feel like it's pretty normal to have friends who don't stan or who don't bias the same bias as you do. Is that just me? I find that that's pretty common. And I'm not sure if that's also like a personality thing. Like if you were thinking of biases as a projective test. But anyway... I feel like what really draws people who are Jeonghan biased to Jeonghan is the fact that he's such an interesting person. Like, he can be analytical, but he can also be goofy. He can be super clever and super smart, but at the same time, he can also do weird things like have a pet rock. And yeah, I feel like most Jeonghan stans are people that are drawn to that kind of contradiction. And so I feel like we are people who tend to enjoy books that have a little bit more intrigue to them, if that makes sense. So I have two recommendations for Jeonghan stans. The first one would be Magic for Beginners by Kelly Link. This book is written in a fabulous style, so it's very, I would say, strange. There are a lot of like strange images and strange things that happen, and it is written so that you're not sure sometimes like exactly what's happening, but then by the end you kind of get a sense of exactly where you are in the story. And in particular, the title story called Magic for Beginners is just really good and something that I really think Jeonghan stans would enjoy, because Jeonghan is all about the team, right? He's all about taking care of the members in his own weird, unusual way. And that story is very strongly about friendship and childhood. And I feel like reminiscing about the past is also something that Jeonghan tends to do a lot. My second recommendation for those who maybe would like something a little bit more straightforward and maybe you're not so into like that whole fabulous magical realism type of thing, and that is A Visit from the Goon Squad by Elizabeth. Who is Elizabeth? A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. This is a book about friendship. It follows these groups of friends who are growing up in this sort of pop punk band scene, and then it follows them through their lives, and as they get older it kind of shows the way that the dynamics of their friendships change. And it's written in a way that I feel is very innovative. It sort of takes the short story form to a whole other level. Like there's one short story here that's told through PowerPoint slides. So it's inventive, but it's engaging and accessible, just like Jeonghan. Let's go from bias to my bias wrecker. Okay, so for Hong Jisoo or Joshua or Shua stans, I feel like Shua stans are very interested in what Joshua reads. And from what I've gathered on the internet, mostly Joshua likes to read fantasy. He's known to be like a big fan of Harry Potter and the Twilight books. And I feel like that is something that a lot of Joshua stans are also into, like fantasy that just pulls you in, and which is still kind of a little bit grounded in reality, if that makes sense. So I still have two recommendations also for Shua stans, just because I feel like these two books kind of represent different dimensions of fantasy writing. So for the first one, I know this is the second book, but I don't know where my first book is right now. So I would recommend the Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman. And I just feel like the Magician's world is like Harry Potter but more mature, if that makes sense. Even the way that they sort of describe the magic in the Magicians is a lot more visceral, a lot more grounded in the real. There's this one part in the first book where they transform into animals, and the way the transfiguration is described there is just so amazing and so cool. Like it really talks about what it feels like when your body changes, what it feels like to be, let's say, a dove or a fox, and it's so freaking cool. So yeah, I feel like if you enjoyed Harry Potter, or if you enjoyed that kind of going to school to study stuff and learn like a craft and then being thrown into the throes of an adventure sort of thing really is something that you like, you will like The Magicians. Also, the show was garbage. So if you didn't like the show and that's your hesitation in reading this, don't worry. The show is not even, it's not. For Joshua stans who might be more interested in like fantasy that's a bit more straightforward but is still written in a very accessible way, I would recommend, hold on guys, tatlo kasi to eh. I would recommend the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. Alright. So, okay, this is the third book. Actually, this is A Conjuring of Light, and I freaking love these books. I got so obsessed with them, and I didn't even mean to read the first one. I just saw it in fully booked, and I was like, browsing through the pages and I started reading the first chapter and I was like, what the heck? This is so good. And I ended up buying it and then finishing it in the span of like 2 days and then going back and getting the other books immediately, which I devoured. It's really, really, really good. It's set in this universe that has like 4 parallel worlds. And the way that this is written is kind of like an alternate universe to ours. It's not completely divorced from our reality. So, for example, it takes place at first in London. So there's like Grey London, which is our London. There's Black London, White London, and Red London. And they're just like different dimensions, different parallel worlds. And the characters in this are so lovable. The plot is so gripping. And honestly, it's one of the most satisfying trilogies I've ever read. Now, the crazy thing about this is it seems like it's still ongoing because V.E. Schwab has tweeted and posted on her Instagram saying she never said that it was just going to be a trilogy and that there is going to be a 4th book that we can expect from her from this series. So yeah, it's nice that there's sort of like an open-endedness to it, but I swear, these 3 books resolve, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like the 4th book will probably already have a different set of characters or a different plot altogether. So I would still recommend these 3 for Joshua Stans. Next, let us move on to June or Moon Junwi. Okay, so I would recommend A Light Bulb Symphony by Phil Kay just because I feel like June is such a refreshing ray of sunshine. I feel like he has that kind of personality that brings an element of levity to any interaction, to any of their content, and even his voice and the way that he dances is just very light, if that makes sense. So yeah, this poetry collection by Phil Kay is hands down one of my favorite poetry collections. It's not very highfalutin, it's not very high concept, but it's just very well written. And I feel like there's a narrative element to it also that would make it not so intimidating for people who may not necessarily be poetry enthusiasts yet. Okay, for Kwon Soon Young or Hoshi stans, I feel like most Hoshi stans are performers or are people that are very present in their daily lives, if that makes sense. And I feel like they tend to enjoy things that are a little bit more action-packed and a little bit more, I guess, straightforward or straight to the point. So here I have some interconnected short stories. This is The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine M. Valenti. So I used to talk about Catherine Valenti a lot. She was one of my favorite authors and she still is, but I'm not so, I guess, obsessed with her in the present moment. But this book contains interconnected short stories, and these interconnected short stories all revolve around the girlfriends of superheroes, and in particular, their girlfriends who have died. It's a play on this common trope in superhero mythology or like superhero stories where they always have this ex-girlfriend who dies in the past and who becomes like a key turning point or a plot device for them to get character development. And it's a very interesting take on that because it gives a voice to those women in these stories and it sort of follows them into the afterlife, what they're talking about, what they're ruminating about. So I think it's something that Hoshi stans will really enjoy because it's still action-packed and there's like a lot of performance and it's funny, but at the same time it's also very heartwarming and deeply effective piece of literature.
Hi everyone, it's Weena, it's editing Weena, and I am so freaking stressed because I just realized that my footage for Wonwoo and for Vernon's like bias recommendations have gotten corrupted, and I'm stressed out because they are 2 of my favorite members. Actually, as of now, like when I'm editing this, Vernon is kind of my bias wrecker now, and I actually did a whole video on Wonwoo's favorite book, so I was just so freaking bummed. But anyway, I'll talk about them now and I'll insert the Vernon clips like later on in this video, so please bear with me. I hope the audio is clear enough, which I think it should be. Okay, so for Wonwoo stans, Wonwoo is like a very serious, philosophical, mysterious guy, and he's got lots of self-confidence, but he also really likes philosophy. He like sort of delving into the meaning of things, and yeah, sort of I noticed in his favorite books anyway, like talking about or like reading stories which talk about getting older, what life means, what you're gonna do with the experience of aging, of letting go of loved ones, that kind of thing. So for Wonwoo stans, I would recommend A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Before anything else, I will say that this book is extremely triggering, and if that is gonna be an issue, don't pick this up. I have another recommendation that can go in place of this, but if you think that you can sort of take it, I would recommend this because it is very well written, and I do think that it has some merit in terms of insight and like the way that it deals with certain ideas. Basically, we follow this guy named Jude, and Jude has had a very, very rough life. He's been through lots of things like sexual abuse, being orphaned, being violently beaten up, and stuff like that. And it talks about finding your redemption through friendship, but also what are the things in your life that can no longer be made up for by all of these good things that happen to you. So yeah, it is a very sad book. It's not the kind of book that has a happy ending or that eventually turns out for the better. It's just really, really sad and depressing, but it is very well written. So I guess it depends on your tolerance in that way. The second book that I would recommend, which I think is a lot easier to read but is just as beautiful and devastating, is Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong. I love Ocean Vuong. I feel like he just writes so well. He writes in this way that I find delicious. Like, I really don't know how else to say it except that his writing is delicious. And this talks a lot about his experience of being an immigrant, about his family, his mother, about the idea of home or a home country, and also the idea of being queer in this very, I guess, like closed off culture and closed off environment. So yes, this is very good, very well written, also very sad, very within that very serious, philosophical, moving the glasses up and down Wonwoo aesthetic.
Okay, next let us go to Mr. Powerhouse. Me and my friend Joy have a joke about Woozi, where if he was your office mate, he'd be the kind of guy who would be like a team lead, or you'd want to have him on your team because he always works super well. And I feel like Woozi stans are kind of the same way. They like things that are very technical. They want to know all of the details of things. And they also tend to kind of be very intense about things, I feel. And so for the Woozi stans, I would recommend The White Album by Joan Didion. There is something about Joan Didion's style that I feel Woozi stans would really, really enjoy. She writes in a way that's unsentimental, that's very fact driven, if that makes sense, like very journalistic. She likes to trace where things come from. She likes to talk a little bit about history, about the physical flow of things. Like she has an essay about water and where the water supply of California comes from. But she mixes that in with like a certain element also of narration, of almost like a diary, if that makes sense. Like she also talks about what's happening in that moment, what it makes her feel, the images that those experiences recall. And I feel like that is Woozi's specialty, actually, like taking all of these moving parts and turning them into something cohesive and beautiful. And I just feel like this book is something that Woozi stans out there would love. Okay, let's move on to The Eight, or Myung-ho or Ming-hao, however you want to say his name. He is like a Scorpio personified, honestly. Like he's very sensitive, he's deeply introspective, he loves to journal and to draw. And I feel like a lot of the Eight stans are also the same way, where they admire that depth. They really like listening to him sort of talk about these reflections on life. And they also like his art, which was featured in one of their docuseries. For Ming-hao stans, I would recommend Blossoms and Bones by Kim Krantz. This is a graphic novel and it has really amazing art. It kind of reminds me actually of the art that Ming-hao makes. Very visceral, very line driven, and also very journal-like, if that makes sense. Basically, this is nonfiction, but in the graphic format. It talks about how Kim Kran sort of dealt with very difficult times in her life. She went through a divorce, she had a miscarriage, but then at the end of it, she also found peace and peace of mind. So, yeah. All right, so let's move on to Mingyu. So I feel like Mingyu is the kind of guy that everyone has a crush on. Like, even if you are not Mingyu biased, you are still kind of Mingyu biased. And I feel like that's because he really has such like a charismatic personality. And all of the Mingyu stans that I know are crazy romantics. And they're people who really like setting the mood, like setting the aesthetic or like the tone for romance, if that makes sense. So yeah, for them, I would like to recommend a classic. And this is What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Raymond Carver. These are short stories, and I honestly think that Raymond Carver is probably a genius. There's just something about his tone and his style that is so unique and so distinctly Raymond Carver. Like, if you are reading something by Raymond Carver, you will know that you are reading something by Raymond Carver. And in particular, a lot of the stories in here are very short and straight to the point and kind of moody stories, if that makes sense. Like, it's all about atmosphere, whether that atmosphere is sad or whether that atmosphere is romantic or hopeful. It's very much really paying attention to all of these little details and these little things that go into the experience of a short story. So yes, Mingyu stans, I hope you enjoy. Moving on to DK. I love DK. DK is like probably my top 5. I feel like in 17 there's always that one member where you just love them. Like, they're not necessarily part of your bias list in the sense that every time you watch videos or something, like, you're super like attracted to them, but there's just something about DK. I think he seems like such a nice guy, and all of the DK stans I know, that's what they like about him too. Like, he seems so dependable, and he seems like someone who would really, really be there for you. And because of that, for DK stans, I will be recommending The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I don't have a copy of this because I read it on my Kindle, but it's just such a heartwarming book. It's refreshing. It's so nice. It's basically this sort of middle grade fantasy-ish book that has to do with this guy who is super duper like tired and working a dead end job, and in that universe the like magical government kind of takes very meticulous stock of these different orphanages, which aren't really orphanages. They're just kind of like houses where magical children are kept because they don't want them to sort of become a danger to the normal world, or like the world of people who are basically muggles. And our protagonist in this goes to this super like faraway orphanage, like in the literally on a small island in the Cerulean Sea, and he just meets some awesome people and his life is changed forever. I feel like you will love this if you are into stories that give you that warm, like fuzzy feeling inside. And also, like, the headmaster character in this reminds me a lot of the kind of persona that DK kind of has, where, you know, he'll be there for you through thick and thin. All right, let's move on to Seungkwan. Seungkwan also is someone that I feel has like a very friendly kind of aura, and whenever I think of him, there's something like kind of heartwarming. And all of the Seungkwan stans I know are like mom friends in their own right, where they always have what you need, they'll always take care of you. And also, they're always the ones who are like very social, like trying to make sure that you're okay, trying to make sure that everything is in order. So yeah, for all of the Seungkwan stans out there, I would like to recommend, oh god, this book is so heavy. I would like to recommend Blankets by Craig Thompson. This is a graphic novel. guys, I'll do my best to hold this up, but if not, I will just post the cutaway. And yeah, so the art is beautiful, and it is a coming of age story about first love, but also about coming to terms with your family and coming to terms with who you are as a person, your faith, what you believe in, and what you are going to do with your life, basically, given where you have come from. Yeah, so it's a really, really good book, and I feel like there's an element of self-care and caring for others in this book that Seungkwan stans will really, really enjoy.
Alright, let us move on to Mr. Hansel Vernon Chue, or Mr. Chue Not Chu. For Vernon stans, I think that Vernon stans are usually like very artsy-fartsy. They like SZA, they like them some Frank Ocean, artsy and offbeat. I will recommend what I think is the most underrated Patti Smith book, and this is Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith. And basically this chronicles the year that she turned 60, if I'm not mistaken. And it goes through like this road trip that she took from Venice Beach in California, and she talks about the different people that she met in that year, and it's just really, really nice. I would say if you enjoyed Blonde by Frank Ocean, which is Vernon's favorite album and also one of my favorite albums, I have like a poster of our Lord and Savior Frank Ocean right in front of me at the moment. Yeah, you will definitely enjoy this, and yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a little bit zany and weird and still deliciously put together. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this, Vernon stans, and I'm so sorry for the ratchet quality of this insert.
And last but not the least, let's go to our maknae, Dino. So I noticed that Dino stans are very similar to Hoshi stans, in the sense that usually, like, if you like Hoshi or if you stan Hoshi, you'll probably stan Dino too, or he will be like your bias wrecker. And I feel like it's because both of them are just such awesome performers. You know, when they say that some people are born for the stage, that's kind of how I feel about Dino and Hoshi. And so for Dino, because he has that like super fierce, fresh energy, this is Citizen Illegal by Jose Olivares. And this poetry collection is super dynamic, super fresh. It's a kind of thing where I feel like it's best read with the author's voice in mind. And I don't know, I feel like there's just something about this that reminds me so much of like very groovy hip-hop music. And I've also attended like a couple of workshops by Jose Olivares, and he has a very, very dynamic teaching style. And I think that really reflects in his poetry. And also these poems are all very relatable and funny. So like, there's one in here called Mexican Heaven, and it says, there are white people in heaven too. They build condos across the street and ask the Mexicans to speak English. I'm just kidding. There are no white people in heaven. Ooh. Yeah, very intense, very funny, very sarcastic in some places, but still enjoyable, engaging, and something that will make you laugh. And that is it for this video. Thank you guys for sticking around. If you have watched until the end, let me know who your 17 bias is. Let me know who your bias wreckers are. And let me know how you found the latest mini album. Oh my god. Also, of course, if you have read any of these books, let me know. And if you have any book recommendations for other fellow 17 stans, leave them in the description below as well. Thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to give this video a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!